Conscription, commonly known as the draft, has been employed by the federal government of the United States in 4 conflicts: the American Civil War, World War I, World War II, and the Cold War, which included the Korean and Vietnam Wars. The military draft brought the Vietnam War to the American home front. Between 1964 and 1973, the U.S. military drafted 2.2 million American men out of an eligible pool of 27 million. Temporary deferments were available for college students, and medical deferments, both temporary and permanent, were also available for people with various disabilities and illnesses. Enlistments provided about 2/3 of American troops during the Vietnam conflict. 80% of enlisted men who served came from poor or working-class families, and 80% of these only had a high school education. In the beginning of the war, the names of all American draft-age men were collected by the Selective Service System. When a young man's name was called, he had to report to his local draft board, which was made up of local community members, so that they could evaluate his draft status. Local draft boards had an enormous power to decide who would go and who would not.
They had a quota to meet every month. So if you came from a small area, you knew you were going to get picked up.
I think with a 46, 47, 48 birthday, it was just a given you were going in the military, unless you had a medical or some kind of a deferment.
Almost everybody in my graduating class of 66, if they didn't go to college, they ended up in Vietnam.
Well, I enlisted because I was informed that my number was coming up at the county draft board. He told me that I'd better do something. They're going to draft me right out of college. And I had 1 semester left to go.
I appealed to the draft board. They postponed my induction. And they said, you finish college and you're going. Don't sign a contract, a teacher's deferment. Well, I tried to get a job teaching, but everybody said, no, we called your draft board and we don't want to give you a contract and then have to turn around and hire another teacher. We're not interested in you.
I was like any person of my age at the time. I watched the Vietnam War on TV. To be quite honest, I mean, I felt a surge of patriotism.
Well, I knew we had troops over there and there was fighting, and we had hospitals over there, so I said, well, I need to be over there. So I volunteered to go over there.
I was tired of school. I hired in the steering gear and didn't like the job I was assigned to. So a week or so later, I enlisted.
I was well aware of various protests going on and people saying good things and bad things about the Vietnam War. I decided in my youthful wisdom to go see what they were talking about.
I remember when the recruiters came to our high school and the Air Force got up and they told how wonderful the bombers they had, and the Army got up there and talked about tanks, and the Navy got up and talked about battleships and cruisers and whatnot, and this crusty old Marine got up in his dress blues and he says, we don't have any of that. He said, we'll give you a rifle and a bayonet and we'll show you how to use it. And guess what? After all these guys get done doing what they do, the Marines have to go in and finish the job.
One of the reasons why I enlisted, I believe, is because of the broken heart. What happens to guys with broken hearts? They enlist in the Foreign Legion. And the only thing we had here close to that was the Marine Corps.
I got out of high school at Houghton Lake and I went down to Saginaw and joined the fire department. Being a fireman or a police officer, you're exempt from the draft. So I said, okay, I'm a fireman down in Saginaw, so I don't have to go. Well, then Houghton Lake sends me my draft notice and says, we don't care you live in Saginaw, you registered in Houghton Lake, goodbye.
I was going to college in 1969 and was majoring in art. I dropped a class, so I lost my deferment. I received a draft pre-induction physical notice for an April Fool's Day, and I knew that wasn't a good sign. So I enlisted in the Air Force and just ignored my draft notice.
I enlisted in the Marine Corps in March of 1966. I enlisted on a buddy plan with 2 of my friends, so 3 of us went in together. Unfortunately, one didn't make it back.
To me, it became very apparent that this was going to be a long engagement. And no way in hell was the South Vietnamese Army or the South Vietnamese Air Force going to be able to handle it themselves.
As the war escalated in 1967 and 68, more soldiers were needed in country by the military commanders. So, on December 1st, 1969, in response to those requests, the Selective Service System conducted 2 draft lottery drawings, the first since 1942.
Mayberry RFD will not be presented tonight, but will return next week at its regularly scheduled time over most of these stations. The Draft Lottery, a live report on tonight's picking of the birth dates for the draft.
Good evening. Tonight, for the first time in 27 years, the United States has again started a draft lottery. And the famous first pick tonight is September 14th, the first birthday that now is designated 001. That beginning in January, local draft boards will induct those men, barring deferments.
I think we needed the lottery. From what I remember, a lot of people felt that the politicians' kids were being exempt, and a lot of people felt that if they were going to put us in a war, that their kids should face the same risks that the rest of us did.
Our draft numbers, they based it on the year you turned 18 in. You base it on the birth year, but you don't actually get drafted till you're 19.
When you became draft eligible, you had several choices. Some people left and went to Canada. Others decided that they wanted a student deferment, and the remainder remained 1A or eligible for the draft. Among those who remained eligible for the draft, there were 2 categories. Those who were selected for service in Vietnam, and those who had been bypassed by the lottery that existed in those days. I happened to be one of the people who was a 1A. I was originally had a student deferment. I let that student deferment go and became 1A eligible for the draft, and by the luck of the draw, I was not picked. So my final classification was 1H, which means you were exposed to the draft, not selected, and therefore you could continue your life. Whereas with the 1S, the student deferment, the minute you became no longer a student, you became eligible for the draft.
So I was going in the military. I was going to be drafted, actually, once I finished college. And so I went in the military. I was in the National Guard for 5 years.
Everybody was being drafted.
When I got that envelope in the mail from the draft board, and it said right on there, I knew from the envelope exactly what it was. And I already knew my number was 63. So now I knew it was time to come on down.
Guys my age were fearful of the Vietnam War. They were fearful of being drafted. We often saw military police driving through the neighborhood looking for deserters.
With the draft, a lot of guys that were hippies were now in the Army.
A lot of my friends were getting the draft notices, and when they did, some of them started drinking massive amounts of pickle juice so that their blood pressure would be higher, and they used different ways to try to get out of it, but some guys openly embraced it and did what they were supposed to do.
And other people had a concern. I did not. I thought that was my duty to go into the Army and to go wherever they told me to go.
When I got orders to go back to Vietnam, I considered going to Canada, but then I remembered that I had an obligation and I need to fulfill it.
Thanks for watching. For more stories like this, consider subscribing to this channel. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. Learn how you can support this channel in the video's description.